Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you today. My name is Nick Harding. I'm the director of Kairos Connection, and we're going to be talking today about some of the blockages to disciple making, or in other words, why aren't we making disciples? Now, first of all, a bit of cultural backdrop to understand why this is difficult, probably more difficult than it's ever been, but not impossible. And I want to encourage you today that it is possible to be an effective disciple maker. The culture, of course, is highly individualistic. That means that everyone's thinking about themselves, their privacy, their rights, they determine their own future. Nobody tells me what to do, that kind of an attitude. Rather than thinking, actually, my best life is lived in relationship with others and as part of community. That's not a natural mindset for most people today. With all of the stresses of recent years, rise in mental health issues, there's a huge level of self-protectionism. People are rightly putting boundaries in place, but wrongly becoming overly defensive to anything being asked of them. We also live in a very consumer society where even our attitudes to church can become consumeristic, which is like, what is this church doing for me, not what I can do for this church. And we pick and choose whether we turn up to something or not. We have something online that meets a need, therefore we don't bother to turn up in person to something. And of course there's a whole anti-authority mindset that goes with our current culture, and that all of these things make it difficult to introduce someone to the idea of being a disciple maker, or even just being a disciple. And so we need to think about these questions. We need to think about the why. Why would somebody want to be a disciple? Why would we be able to explain to them, this is for your benefit? It's not because I'm trying to get something from you. It's because I'm trying to give something to you. That it's for their benefits, because they're going to grow in their faith. Hopefully they've got that desire at least to grow in their faith, or to explore what it means to have faith, because this is something potentially that's going to be good in their lives if they find faith. Most people see people of faith and actually feel quite jealous. I've heard that many times. Oh, I wish I had faith like yours. Actually, coming to faith and growing in faith are good and positive things. And of course, we can also point to the fact that this is helping you become the person that God created you to be, and to fulfill your potential. And ultimately, the greatest fulfillment in life is following Jesus, growing as a disciple. So what are some of these blockages? Just in a few minutes, just going to touch on 6 different things that are common blockages to becoming a disciple maker. Why aren't we making disciples? Number 1, we have no non-Christian friends. If we've been around a long time, we struggle to find people who we've not spoken to in the past about our faith, who we've not invited to church in the past and they've said no. Where do we go next? Really simply, we have to get out there a bit more. We have to put ourselves in the way of meeting new people. We need to find a whole new group of connections to start on the journey of the disciple maker. We need new connections. And that means stopping thinking about just me and my small group of friends and thinking about, how do I make new connections with people? So here's a really simple tip. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're at the shops, the supermarket, the school gates, at the gym, wherever it might be, just try this. Next time you pass somebody, just say, hi, how are you doing? And see what happens. I used to do this when I was dog walking a lot, when we had a dog, and I had a little internal game with myself playing, who can I get to respond to my hi, how you doing question. It was always a lot of fun. And sometimes that then leads to conversations. Of course, we have to be willing to be inconvenienced, be willing to have to stop and start a conversation if they obviously want to do that. But we can have fun exploring new contacts. Just a week ago today, I was down at a bar in the centre of Liverpool and went down to hear a new local jazz fusion quartet, and looking forward to having some fun, just minding my own business, sitting at the back at the only table that was free. And a young couple come and sit next to me. Never met them before, late 20s, early 30s. Really nice young couple, and just, hi, how are you doing? Just got chatting with them, and they were very willing to chat. Even though they'd come for a night out for themselves, they were engaging, and it wasn't long before I dropped a few little bits of bait into the water to see if they'd pick up on them. We were talking about music, and they're asking me, did I play an instrument? So I just said, well, I used to play guitar in church a bit. I was never any good for our worship, and just seeing if that went anywhere. And of course, a few minutes later, not of course, but in this occasion, the young girl says, "Oh, that's interesting. You're part of a church, are you?" So yes, I am. So she said, "Oh, my dad's really committed to his church in Northern Ireland." And we got onto a great long chat about faith. I was able to tell my story and engage with the guy as well when she was out getting the cocktails. And, it was just a really fun evening. And by the end of it, she wanted an email address so she could connect with me with her dad. Who knows where that will go. But it was just fun making a new connection. Why? Because I was just ready to do that. I was also ready to tell my story. But we'll come to that in a moment. Number 2, we don't know how to chat beyond talking about the weather or work or family. Something that's very familiar and comfortable. We don't know how to move into a spiritual conversation with someone. And this is where telling our story is so helpful. We have some training, part of a Brighter course that you can access, which will cover how do you tell your story? How do you learn to do that really naturally and easily? Just as I did with this couple a week ago. It just was the most natural thing in the world. They were drawn in, they were interested, they asked questions, they were surprised by some things. And I know that's left a deposit in their life. It'll leave them asking questions and thinking about spiritual things. Because if we want to multiply, we have to make these new connections. And if we want to go deeper in conversations, we have to learn to both listen and love. We want to listen deeply to what people are saying, because they will give us cues that we can pick up on in the conversation that may lead to something spiritual in the conversation. We want to genuinely love them, to show that they're important to us by being interested in them. And I found if I'm interested in the other person, it's often not long before they'll ask me about myself, and that gives me a chance to share my story of faith, or a bit of my story that's relevant to the conversation. It's so simple. When you've practiced, when it's become natural to you, and you can do it in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you've got to share some or all of your story with another person. That takes the conversation to a spiritual level. But it requires genuinely loving the people we're with and listening deeply to what they have to say. Number 3, we've got into a conversation with someone, they seem to be open to spiritual things, but we don't have anything to invite them to that will help them go on a spiritual journey. Now, something like the Alpha course is the obvious thing. Regular guest services in church, summer barbecues where they're going to meet our other Christian friends, all sorts of ways that we can help people go on a spiritual journey. But we need to be ready with those. We need to have that in the back of our mind. As a missional community, or as a small group in church, or even as a whole church, we need to have a whole raft of things that are on-ramps for people who are exploring faith in Jesus, and just have those ready. So in our own community, we're regularly running Alpha courses just for people we're in connection with, and they've been incredibly fruitful in seeing the people that God's given us those connections with and taken us into those deeper conversations with, an opportunity to explore faith. A couple in our community were prayer walking the area, and they bumped into a woman who's we've just known very, very slightly. And as they got talking to her, they offered her prayer because she expressed some needs. And having had a really positive response to prayer, we were then able to invite her onto the Alpha course that was about to start. And she was able to make about half of the sessions, and is now growing in her faith and has come to church a couple of times as a result of that, because there was something ready-made in the pipeline to invite her to. Number 4, what if they become a Christian and go, I don't know what to do now? And that's the fear of what happens if someone becomes a Christian. The thing we're most longing for is a real thing, because we'll feel like we don't know where to take them apart from just bring them along to church. Well, that's a good thing to do. Church, the gathering of all of the believers in our area, in that gathered expression that might well be on a Sunday, is a good place to bring people to, because they will grow in their faith. But we also want to introduce them to our small group, or our missional community, or our microplant, because we know that's also where they will start to grow in their faith. So a young couple who just finished our last Alpha course last week came along to our own missional community. Well, one of them did, came along last night, and now she's obviously now ready to grow in the context of our community and building those relationships and sharing the load of helping her grow. You know, we say, don't we, that it takes a whole village to raise a child, and it takes a whole community to help a new Christian grow in their faith. Of course, meeting regularly on a one-to-one basis with a new Christian is really important. There's another young couple my wife and I are meeting with on a weekly, fortnightly basis just to help them read the Bible, help them learn to pray, help them understand what it is they've got themselves into. And that's because they're keen to grow and learn. That's a real joy. So it's really good to have something ready-made to invite people onto, but also to help a place where they can grow in their faith. And we can prepare ourselves. We can make sure we've got materials available. This little booklet, Why Aren't We Making Disciples, which we wrote and published earlier in the year, is a really good little tool to give you some ideas around disciple making, the kind of things that you may want to think about when you're helping a newborn Christian grow in their faith. We can be prepared. Hopefully we will have had something modeled to us by the person who's discipling us. And hopefully you are all being discipled, because we want disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Anyway, that's the fourth. Number 5 is the fear of being overwhelmed by people's needs. That's a real barrier sometimes. Well, I don't want to go down that road of becoming a disciple maker. What happens if I get a good connection? What happens if I get into a spiritual conversation? What happens if I invite them onto something like an Alpha course and they become a Christian, and then I get overwhelmed with their needs? And yes, that is a real issue. But this is where the whole community aspect comes in. This is where we can all pull together to help raise someone who may well have multiple needs. It was the poor people that received Jesus gladly. And it's, of course, the most broken people who recognize their need of Jesus most frequently. And so we are going to have people coming into our community and into church who have multiple needs. In the early days of our missional community, a young Somali asylum seeker started coming to community as a Muslim. He came every week. He loved the food. He loved the company. And after about 2 months, he made a very clear decision that he wanted to follow Jesus as well. It was wonderful. And then the whole thing happened. We realized he had language needs, he had mental health needs, he had financial needs, he had difficulties with his accommodation, he had legal needs for his asylum stay. I mean, the list went on and on and on. Now, if that was just down to me, that would have completely overwhelmed me. But as a community, we all gathered around this young man, and all of us played our part in helping meet those needs. And over the following year, he was able to really grow in his faith. And before the government, in their wisdom, moved him to the northeast, where he was able to connect with another church. But together, none of us were overwhelmed, because we shared the joy of seeing a new believer grow in their faith with all of their needs. We need to have boundaries. That's a healthy thing, to have boundaries so that people don't cross those when we're discipling them. We need to have access to other agencies, pastoral support in the church, for really specialist areas of need, and other agencies that need, general practitioners or others that need to be involved in the care of new Christians where those needs need other people to get involved as well. Sometimes we feel over-responsible for new believers, and we need to check ourselves and make sure we remember we're just the under-shepherds, we're just the under-disciplers. Jesus himself is the shepherd, he's the main discipler, and it's him that's raising them in their faith. We're just doing what he asks us to do. So finally, number 6, this feels costly. Do I want to go down this road of becoming a disciple maker? And the short answer is yes, it is costly. Raising natural babies is a costly thing. Ask any mother who's had children. She'll say yes, for the first year it was really hard work, but tell you what, the joy was incomparable. For all those sleepless nights and for all of those struggles of not feeling sure about what to do or confident of how to help this newborn baby, that mother will say it was all worth it, because the joy far exceeded the challenges and struggles. We know Jesus from Hebrews 12 said it's for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. And of course, as disciple makers, we are called to take up our cross to follow him. We need to remember there's joy in the path ahead of being a disciple maker. The bottom line, and I'll finish here, the bottom line, of course, is that we are called to make Jesus the Lord of our life. It was the confession of the early church, Kyrios Isus, Jesus is Lord. And that's the starting point for being a disciple, let alone being a disciple maker, that we owe him everything. He has paid the ultimate price for us. We want to give him our lives and follow him in not only being disciples, but becoming disciple makers. We are not our own. The scripture says we were bought with a price. I hope those few thoughts will help you in being a more effective, fruitful, and joy-filled disciple maker. I want to tell you, as I've seen dozens of people come to faith over the years, the joy is inexpressible. Go for it.